I'd been thinking about elephants and the idea of riding an elephant through the English countryside for quite a long while. I mean, back in 5, 6, 7 years ago, I wrote a children's story in which an elephant rather magically just appears wandering along a sandy beach in Cornwall. So the thing had been kind of knocking around in my mind, and also the idea of a boy who's looking after a big creature like that had been wandering around in my mind.
The novel is an extraordinary account of one young man's relationship with elephants. As his master, Lord Bidborough, actually bought these elephants. There is a feeling throughout the novel that it actually could be true. Is it true? Is there some elements of truth in it?
Lord Bidborough isn't the man he doesn't buy the elephants in the beginning. The elephants are landed at Bristol in the early 1750s and are bought by a sugar merchant. And Lord Bidborough is this extraordinarily wealthy English nobleman who then buys the elephant, or one of the elephants, off the sugar merchant. Is it true? No, it's not true at all. It's an entirely imagined story. However, having said that, it's the kind of story which is just about possible that it might have been true. There were almost no elephants, none that I know of, in England in the early part of the 18th century. But by the 1760s or 1770s, it was just about becoming more probable, I think, that there were maybe 1 or 2 elephants in the country. The royal family had elephants, I think, in the 1760s at St James's Park in London. And the novel covers a period of about 40 years, up to the 1790s. By the 1790s, a menagerie had opened in London in which there were elephants.
It's a delightful relationship that you've created between Tom Page and the elephant, to the extent that you start putting words into the elephant's mind. We start hearing what the elephant might speak. In fact, at one point, Tom is accused, if that's the right word, of being able to speak elephant. But how much of you is there in Tom Page?
I don't know that there's anything of me in Tom Page. I think if there's anything of me in Tom Page, it must be something to do with his relationship with the countryside. The early part of the novel sets him in rather lush English countryside, somewhere in Somerset. And that sort of ecstatic pleasure that he takes in the countryside, and that the elephants take with him, is something that I've felt incredibly strongly in all my life.
It's beautifully researched, Christopher. The lovely detail about elephant behaviour, about sexual behaviour of elephants, and about how they react to humans, and yet only Tom can understand this. How on earth did you do your research?
When I tend to write the story first, because I get excited by the story. And then I try doing most of the research afterwards. This causes problems. It's a difficult problem, because you discover you've made all sorts of mistakes. I think the biggest mistake, the greatest difficulty in technically in terms of writing, was not in terms of research about how elephants behave, but in terms of material about the language, getting the language right and not having it packed full of 19th and early 20th century anachronistic words.
Because it is written in 18th century English.
It is written in 18th century English, that's right. I mean, I did, as far as the elephants go, I did go to a zoo, I talked to an elephant keeper, and that was remarkably interesting itself, because the zoo had a crazed elephant there. An enormous elephant in a state of immense mental anguish and distress. It had recently been moved to the zoo. It was very unhappy and extremely violent. So much so that there were metal bars, steel bars, all the way around this enclosure, and then a fence beyond that. But when I went anywhere near the metal bars, I was pulled forcibly back by the keeper of the elephant, who said that if I didn't watch out, the elephant was perfectly liable to whip towards me, sneak its trunk underneath and get hold of my ankle and just drag me into its enclosure.
Good Lord.
It was a dangerous elephant, and they can become very dangerous and very distressed.
And you did use some of this in the book, didn't you, with the male elephant, and when he did get very visibly distressed?
Yeah, the reason I primarily went to see this elephant kept in a zoo was to try and investigate this mysterious phenomenon of must, in which male elephants periodically, every year or so, begin to undergo a complete personality change, and nobody's quite sure what the purpose is of must. It's probably got some sort of sexual basis to it. But they do then become extremely violent and very dangerous indeed. Even in India, the mahouts in India, the keepers of the elephants in India, tend to tie them up and leave them ready to calm down. And it can go on for weeks.
And this weeping of the eye was intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, what they have is they've got these glands right up in the temples of the head, and these things begin to ooze down the side of the face, and you get this tarry smell, and it may be that it's just the weeping of the glands which irritates the elephants so much that they become so dangerous, but they are at that stage very dangerous indeed.
Did you enjoy writing it?
Yeah, it was lovely writing it. When I was at the start, a lot of it was written very quickly, and at the start it was just like swimming in different water, because the whole of the 18th century language is a rather marvellous language. What you've got is a rather formal language, but underneath it all sorts of romantic feelings, elaborately expressed and just bubbling and waiting to come to the surface. So you've got this rather formal structure holding all these feelings in place, and that tension between the formality and the sort of spontaneous emotion underneath is a wonderful one to write through. I mean, I'll give you just one example of this. Early on in the novel, there's a point at which both elephants have broken into some gardens and have caused a great deal of havoc and damage to these beautiful gardens. And Tom Page, who's looking after the elephants, is told about this, and he says, "I can scarcely express the full extent of my horror at this intelligence." And that's a very typical sort of 18th century sentence. What he's not saying is, "I'm completely horrified." What he's saying is, "I can scarcely express it." And so what you've got is the formal sentence structure there, but the horror all contained within it, but held in a very tight sort of straitjacket.